Good evening. This evening we'll be spending some time working to understand national interests. This video reflects learning target number 1. I can identify and explain the development of a country's national interest. We will focus specifically on the United States, but this is a procedure you should be able to apply to other countries as well. What is national interest, you might ask? National interest refers to a country's needs or wants. You have personal interests, those things that you would like or that you need to have. Countries are the same way. Typically, we put a country's national interests into 3 different categories. The first category is economic interests. The second category is security interests. And finally, ideological interests. We will now consider each of these in turn. In regards to economic interests, in general, all countries want to promote the economic welfare of their people. Countries want to make sure that their citizens have an adequate standard of living. They want to ensure the economic development and growth of domestic industries, and they want to establish trade relations with other nations that will allow those domestic industries to flourish. The specific economic interests of a country, however, vary depending on the type of economy that country has. In many economically developing countries, like many of those in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, the primary focus is the acquisition of the basic necessities of life, food, water, shelter, healthcare, education, that are needed for people's survival. So the focus is really on providing a basic standard of living. These countries may also be focused on attracting foreign investment or tourism in order to strengthen their economies. Other nations that are more highly industrialized, such as the United States, Germany, Japan, they have a variety of products that they sell, including food, industrial machinery, automobiles, and a great deal of technology. These are countries where they are producing more than they need, which they then export to other countries around the world in exchange for other goods or finished products or money. In these places, economic growth depends on the ability to buy and sell products or services abroad. And so the national interest of a government in these countries is going to be to find a way to allow the citizens to acquire as much of the goods and services as they wish. Here's an example of an economic interest in the United States. If we consider that the unemployment rate of the United States is approximately 8%, it's logical to conclude that one economic interest of the United States is to encourage businesses to create more jobs. Take a moment now to think about what are some of the other economic interests of the United States. The second type of interests are security interests, and in general, all countries want to keep their people safe and secure from both outside threats and also from internal instability. They need to protect their natural borders. They will often work to maintain relationships with allies and ensure the safety of their citizens domestically from violence and crimes. How concerned a particular society is about security will depend on how they perceive the threat against them. In thinking about an example of a security interest of the United States, since there was a terrorist attack at this year's Boston Marathon carried out by 2 immigrants, it makes sense that a security interest of the United States is to increase safety and security at major events in large cities, as well as to develop a strategy for ensuring that immigrants and their families do not wish to do harm to Americans. Take a moment now and consider what are some other security interests of the United States. The final type of interest is ideological interest. All countries want to protect the way of life that is enjoyed by their people, and they want to make sure that their people are happy or satisfied, that they have access to what they value. Some countries also feel so strongly about their way of life, their religion, their government, etc., that they want to share it with other countries as well. One example of an ideological interest of the United States has to do with our value of home ownership. Home foreclosure rates have increased, and it has been difficult for many citizens to acquire mortgage loans. As such, it's reasonable to conclude that an ideological interest of the United States is to work with banks to help people to stay in their homes or to otherwise find affordable housing solutions, as the American dream of homeownership seems to have become less of a reality in recent years. In a different type of example, the United States believes that people have a right to have a voice in their government, and that democracy, therefore, is the ideal form of government. As such, it's reasonable to conclude that an ideological interest of the United States is to support the development of a more democratic government in Egypt as they work to rebuild a government following the fall of their dictator, Hosni Mubarak. Take a moment now to consider, what are other ideological interests of the United States that you can think of? Just a few more things to keep in mind when thinking about national interest. First, we often describe national interest in terms of what a country should start, stop, or continue doing. So national interest should be stated as a specific goal, typically as a verb. For example, a country might say that they need to start attracting foreign investment in order to build factories and create jobs for their citizens. Additionally, it's important to keep in mind that not everyone agrees on national interest. People have different ideas on what a country needs to do, different ideas about where the government's attention should focus. Ultimately, however, it is the people in positions of power in the government that will ultimately determine what national interests a country will try to achieve. So how do we figure out what a country's national interest actually is? Well, an easy way to do it is to start taking a look and figuring out, is there something that's threatening the physical, economic, or social well-being of the people? If so, start there. It's important to keep in mind that national interest is a conclusion that is based on specific facts about the world. These facts are interpreted through people's opinions or perspectives about the world, which is why not everyone agrees on what a country's national interest ought to be. As you are thinking about national interest, however, begin first with the facts about the world that you can identify, specific, concrete, sensory information that can be verified about things that are happening. Then consider your own perspective, opinions on how the world should work, or any background information you have about those facts that can help you to have a fuller understanding of the situation. And from there, you can then draw conclusions about what a country needs to stop, start, or continue doing in order to address those specific needs. Tomorrow, we'll spend some time in class practicing drawing conclusions about national interest. In the meantime, however, have a lovely evening. The end.